Hi, I'm Roxy. I'm one of the festival directors of Lower East Side Film Festival. This is our 10th year. Happens to be virtual this year, but I'm so happy to have all you guys here to chat about your films. This is the Not Suitable for Work from Home Short Showcase Edition, and we're really excited to talk about your films. And we were excited when we started seeing films in our programming that could all kind of lend themselves to this somewhat provocative, sexy, awkward, maybe confusing, angsty kind of topics. And you guys all kind of provide a lot of different films, which is really exciting. We've got some music video, we've got some animation, we've got some other confusing, mysterious storytelling. We'll get to that later. So first off, I just want to start with, let's start with Julia Kennelly, whose film Marcy Learned Something New. Julia, you are actually a returning alumni filmmaker. I think you were in, I want to say 2018, 2019?
Yeah, 2018.
2018. Okay, cool. So welcome. Tell us a little bit about kind of a log line description of your film and for folks that haven't seen it.
Sure. So it's about a widow who goes to a dominatrix class. Basically, she's feeling really run down by all these typical self-improvement programs that women often go through. And so she tries this instead and ends up finding it to be really healing and inspiring. And she ends up going on a date with a man and trying out being dominant with him for the first time.
Yes, and tell us who that actress happens to be. She's one of my favorites.
Yeah, it's Rachel Dratch from SNL.
Yeah, she's awesome. Congrats on having her in the film. I think she was perfectly cast. Tell us a little bit about where the idea came from. How did this get from script to screen and all that?
Sure. So I was just very interested when I learned that these sorts of formal classes existed, and I learned about them a few years ago. Obviously I knew, about the kink community, but I didn't know that you could just sort of sign up for like an intro to dominatrix workshop. And so then I signed up for them and went and learned about it. And honestly, the environment is really supportive and positive. And I think there's a lot of stigma around not just kink and BDSM in general, but the way that it gets portrayed in film and TV specifically often is very negative. And so I was just interested in telling a story about how positive and inspiring it is, and also just how many different kinds of people are there, which I think also gets shown in very just specific kinds of people that are depicted frequently, when the reality is it's a very diverse group of people who participate in it.
Yeah, and tell us about the filmmaking process. How did you capture that community in a way that felt authentic? It's funny. It's a funny film, but you delicately walk that line too. You're not, it's not exploitative of that community or in any way. So how do you go about navigating that kind of film?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think one thing that was very helpful was doing a lot of participating in the educational structure myself for a while. And one of the workshops that I attended, I talked to the instructor afterwards, and then she became a consultant on the film. So she was really wonderful. She consulted both on the script, and she acted as an intimacy coordinator and made sure everything was really accurate. She also connected us to the woman who plays dominatrix teacher in the film, Ashley Page, who's also incredible. So having the two of them, and then they brought also a bunch of people who came to just be in the scene, to be extras for the classes, which was great. And in general, I just think, as I'm sure this is going to come up a lot because we're all dealing with sex in our films, but, I have seen a lot of people, not necessarily taking the time to discuss really thoroughly with your actors and your crew how you're going to approach any kind of sexual content. And I think something that's great about BDSM and the fact that it actually involves stunt work and things that have to be really, really specifically negotiated is it means that you are forced to have these conversations, not only about the safety and emotional safety of your actors, but also creatively. Like you have to be really specific about why are we doing this and what do we want to get out of this scene, which I think is a really wonderful part of the process.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And what was it like for someone like Rachel Dratch to approach this role? What was her interest in it? How did that come to be, having her
Yeah.
tricks?
I mean, she's amazing. She's so game. I mean, like, she definitely did not have experienced this kind of thing. And she was just like, well, you know, I'm here. Obviously, she's generally just a very willing to, you know, she's not afraid of like looking silly, you know. And so she was just like, you know, she was very enthusiastic. We had one rehearsal before we shot where we went over a lot of that stuff and like safety and how we were going to shoot it and all of that. But she basically, we had cast her, we had a casting director who connected her to the film. And luckily she liked the script. She seemed to connect to it. And I had one phone call with her before she like agreed to do it, but she was honestly, she's wonderful and she was so game. And even though short films are obviously not always the easiest sets to be on, she seemed to have a good time and that was really lovely.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thanks so much for sharing we love the film obviously, and thanks for thinking of us again on submitting your work. You know, we're glad to have you back. I'm going to jump over to Kevin for the film Boys and Toys. Tell us a little bit about, you know, logline kind of description and where the idea kind of came from for your film.
I would say it's one of the cringiest, most awkward one-night stands of all time. Would be the logline and the idea. Yeah, it actually stemmed from a feature I was working on, and I just compressed sort of two of the characters and made it into sort of a simple story about the themes of, you know, sexual appropriateness and sort of stunted growth and maturity within you know, people in my social circle.
And how, just to kind of go off to what Julia was saying, how did you go about capturing the sex or the romance and that kind of thing in your film in terms of, you know, figuring out how you wanted to convey that?
There's not much romance. I think, you know, I think as long as you check in first with the actors and make sure that they're comfortable with each other and get on the same page, you know, and having conversations beforehand, then I think you're good. I mean, there's nothing so explicit in it. We just had a few conversations beforehand. It's more sort of like awkward than it is sort of terrible for them on set at the time, if that makes sense. It's more like, it seems more awkward when you watch it than when you're actually filming it.
Is it something that you're drawing from your own experience? Were there uncomfortable one-night stands that you faced, or what?
Never in my life. Yeah, I mean, it's not based on specific story, but, you know, actually both the male and female character, I identify with in different ways, and I took different things that I've experienced and infused it into both of their stories. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think it's hard because I wanna talk more, but I don't want to give it away about kind of, you know, what happens. But but I think it's a really, I mean, the woman in the film, I'd say too, it's like a 30-something woman kind of dealing with, you know, where she's at in life a little bit, and I just think that's a theme that I'm sure a lot of us can relate to, and kind of where you hope to be by this age and stuff like that.
Right.
But,
yeah, I think it's sort of like, I feel like you want to cheer for her for going out on a limb, and then it all like blows up in her face.
Right, right.
So it's like it's unfortunate in that way. And I also think that you can be really grown up in some ways and then really not grown up in other ways, and that's sort of, you know, can lead to bad things.
Oh, well, one thing too, I've been talking with a lot of filmmakers about too is, you know, as a narrative filmmaker and you're used to shooting with a bunch of people on set and all that stuff, you know, have you during this time now, has that shifted maybe your creativity in terms of how to proceed with future projects, or where's there projects that you had that are kind of just like on hold? Or, you know, I think as indie filmmakers, we always face obstacles, and maybe just this is a new one. But I'm just curious, you know, how you're going about the next future.
I don't know yet. I feel really lucky that I wasn't in the middle of anything right when this all hit. You know, I know people who were, and that's terrible because now they have to make all these. I think it still feels kind of TBD. I think it's something that will definitely be a part in the future, but I haven't felt like jumping on the bandwagon yet of like, what's my version of this new reality? Because maybe it feels contrived, or I just don't know what it is. If it comes to me, then that's awesome. But I haven't. I've been just sort of proceeding cautiously with going on and what I was interested in doing before this all hit, and then see how that might affect it, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, and that's, I think, a similar sentiment I've been hearing from a lot of folks. But I would say watching all of your films, a lot of times, and especially yours, it makes you nostalgic for some of the experiences.
Being in bars?
Yeah, going to meeting people in bars and stuff. I mean, that kind of thing, and just being around people. So thank you for, you know, giving us a bit of nostalgia there.
Yeah, it's historical fiction now. It's great.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much, and we'll get back to everybody towards the end. But I want to kick it over to Nadia in Budapest. And it's, what time is it there for you?
It's between 10 and 11
at night. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks for staying up. I really appreciate it. Tell us about your film, and also you're an alumni filmmaker as well. Your film The Noise of Licking, was, I think, 2016, 2017, I want to say.
Maybe 2017, I think.
Yeah. So tell us, about your film and the medium that you're using for your film.
So my film Symbiosis, it's an animated short, and it's about a woman who starts to investigate her husband's mistresses, and during her investigations she becomes more and more curious about them and spirals into an obsession. And this is what the film is for me mainly. I don't want to give away the story either, but she's collecting pieces of them mentally and physically as well. And it came from an idea from years ago when I was imagining a woman who makes a collection, like an insect collection, out of mistresses that her husband is cheating on her with.
Yeah, it's a really, really amazing film, and so beautiful, the animation style. Tell us a little bit about that too. Is that all coming from you? Are you designing everything, or, you know, how does that work, I guess?
Thanks so much. No, I'm not a good animator. I used to be in the live action industry as an assistant director, and I started animation quite late, after I was 31, and I never really learned to become a really great animator. So I leave the animation part to people who are good at it. So I write my stories and I design it. And of course, even if you don't animate, you can plan each shot and draw the figures, draw the layouts, and do the animatic and storyboard. And but for this film, the backgrounds, I also had help by my friends. So 3 of us made the backgrounds, but the but the main design is mine, and the story is by me and a co-writer. And sorry about the National Geographic scenes behind me, but I have 2 guest cats, and it's kind of crazy right now. Sorry about that.
Great. I think one thing that's really interesting about your work too is the element of just the sound design, especially with Noise of Licking, but also this film too, like, you know, adding that extra component in this kind of style of animation, I think is really interesting. So, you know, how do you go about designing the soundscape for something like this?
For both films, I worked with the same sound designer who I trust completely. And for the first one, for my graduation film, I had to make a lot more planning because he joined the project later. But for Symbiosis, I was very specific about wanting to work with him from the beginning, because I feel that this film is kind of like a collection itself. So the animation style is a little bit mixed media too. And also I wanted the sounds to be the images and the sound to connect really well, and to have the sound design enhance, like sometimes drive the story a little bit. So I was trying to plan all the visuals with the sound in my head, and it just really came together when Peter Benjamin Lukács, my sound designer, really made it. So this time, fortunately, I didn't have to make a draft sound either. I could just explain to him what was needed, and it was really amazing. I think the sound adds to both films so much that I would be very handicapped without them for the films. So
yeah, it's awesome. And I mean, it's a bummer that we can't hear it in a big theater altogether, but I encourage everyone who's watching these films just to crank it up. I mean, for everyone's film, obviously, but I think it was especially exciting to kind of hear all those, you know, extra additions that bring it to life. Well, thank you for joining so late at night too. I really appreciate it. And again, thanks for thinking of us again to submit to. We're really excited to see your work. And I mean, I'll put it to you too, are there things that you're still able to work on, because you work a lot in animation? Has that changed anything with your workflow, or are there projects that you're still pushing forward on?
yeah, actually from the beginning of March, I joined a not live action, but a feature animation project as a coordinator. So I was working from home, and fortunately animation didn't have to stop because everybody would have been working from home anyway. So we were just working from home, and I'm very used to that, because even during this production for Symbiosis, for this last film I made, there were times when I didn't leave the house for 4 weeks, and only to take out the trash. So I'm very used to this, and I'm very fine with being quarantined. But now we are back to the studio again, so now it's back to more production. And basically, not much really changed for us, but I know some people who have to do sound recording, for example, and maybe actors are reluctant to go to a sound studio at this stage. So some of the aspects are a little more difficult, but animation is fine. Mm-hmm. Live action is much worse, of course. Yeah.
Have you been in Budapest this whole time?
Yes, I was stuck at home, and I live here now. So I missed some festivals that I was supposed to go to in the US, for example. Mm-hmm. So I was sad about that, but at least I was home.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that we can, join in this way too. I mean, not every time when we have folks from international places submit work, they can't always join. I mean, so I really appreciate actually being able to talk.
This is my first actually for doing a Q&A like this.
Totally. Awesome. Well, I want to switch it over to, I was told Jinx McGee would be here, but I'm seeing Jonna Terry Johnson. Yeah. Your screen name doesn't say Jinx, so I
know. I tried to change it. I was just running a little late, but John Terry, tell me what you want.
I'm just messing with you. Thanks for being here, and tell us a little bit about your film. I'll just say first that when we saw this one come through, our programming team usually likes to watch stuff as a group because we feel like movies are made to be, seen as a group. And when this came through too, we loved it. It was like, we were just like, this is a delight. This is, I don't know what this is, but I love this. So
All
please
right.
explain.
Well, I wanted to make something fun. I wanted to make something queer. I've been writing for other people for a decade or more, and it's always he, she, I love her beautiful hair. So it felt like it was time for me to put something out on my own, and it's meant to be a satire, as there's so much pop and hip hop music that's really about how beautiful she is, the booty, the body. So I wanted to make something about the D, and it really just came together very quickly. I showed it to my friend who is a cinematographer, and he said, hold the phone, I get dibs on this video. And within a week we had written the song, we had made the video, and it was super fun.
So how many hot dogs were involved in the making of this video?
There were a lot of hot dogs, and that was a life highlight.
Right. It's just 3 or 4 PAs scouring all of the local grocery stores to get enough, or?
Well, the idea came to me because I went to the grocery store, and it was maybe 6th of July. So I saw all of these discount hot dogs, and I thought, okay, we're filling up a bathtub with these discount hot dogs. It's going to happen.
Well done. You did it. And who were some of the lovely men that fill up the background with their gyrating pelvises, and how did you find those guys?
Well, I had friends come over for this shoot, and I did not tell them what they were getting into.
And they were delighted, or?
They were delighted. They were delighted. They were all very willing to play along. So I'm grateful to them for that, because the video obviously relies heavily upon that. So
were there any additions to their area?
No, all
that was all
natural. All natural.
Wow. You have some good friends.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, is there give us some background too, or is this kind of stuff writing music videos and music and that kind of stuff, is that your background, or what other kind of projects?
I've written a lot for other artists, and I've done a lot of put out a lot of stuff myself. It's always been a little more serious. So I toured with a folk band for a long time, and it was like heartfelt, kind of mushy stuff the whole time. And I think this is a little bit of a response to 10 years of being super serious, and I thought, I need to make something fun. I need to make something queer. And that, I think, encapsulates a lot more of my personality. So it's a different side of my music than people are used to, but I'm super happy with the way it came out, and it was a blast to make, obviously.
Yeah. Any memorable moments from the shoot?
Well, being in a bathtub full of hot dogs, it was cold. So I was shivering until they'd say, all right, and go. And then I, maintain composure as best I could, but it was a cold, exhilarating experience.
Well, I'm glad it made it to the screen, because it's stamped its way into history. So thank you.
All right. Well, thank you for having me. I'm stoked.
Awesome. Well, let's go over to Mary and Jenny. And like I said, if it's okay with the rest of y'all, if you want to just turn off your video so that the gallery view kind of shifts a little bit, it's just easier on our editing team that way. Tell us, ladies. Oh wait, Kevin, I still see you. Hold on. Oh, he's gone. Okay, great. But stay on, don't leave, just be video off. Okay. First of all, Jenny, I don't know if we met officially, but I feel like maybe, but I know you. I know your man, Graham.
Yes. We met at your holiday party.
Yes. Welcome. I was excited to see your name, and I was like, wait, I know her. And your face in the film, obviously, too. So tell us a little bit about Unfinished Business.
Yeah. Well, Mary and I are longtime friends, grew up together in Dallas and have started collaborating the past couple of years. And we, were brainstorming one night, drinking some wine, and this kind of was a nugget of an idea that stuck with us. We were interested in telling a paranormal story. And I think the seed that got planted was, what if that trope of like, well, actually, I'm realizing I haven't seen it, so I don't want to ruin it.
The reveal of the ending was something so stupid that it just became a joke about everything. But yeah, it's about a male stripper and his paranormal experience.
And I think you're happen to be sitting right now in the
room. There he is.
Yes, there he is.
I didn't send Jenny the background in time.
Oh, it's okay.
You can look at my closet.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about the filming, process, and the what was the intention behind the time period too? Is kind of a specific, like, very kitschy kind of vibe. How did you guys land on that?
Yeah, I feel like it came from a lot of different things, and it's almost like we did a little bit of exploration of how our brains ended up where they did. But we have these women from the 80s who are kind of acting like disgusting, man-eating, power tripping women, and that was something that we've kind of just been thinking about in other work too, like what feminism looks like today versus kind of what we grew up with watching. We both also took a big revisit to Death Becomes Her, which I think probably you can see the influence in that. But yeah, stylistically and ideas wise. But yeah, just like all these movies about powerful business women in the 80s and how they some of it gets it right and some of it feels so off. It's just something we've been consuming too. So that's a part of it.
Like, yeah, feminism in a man's world of like behaving like men to get ahead was sort of, I think the idea behind putting it in the 80s was like, it was problematic in its own way. And these women like lusting after this man and all of that, like, is not really what we think of as effective feminism now.
And it was also kind of like a sneaky way to have the person wearing the least amount of clothes in our film be a man. Like, haven't seen that in a minute, so we wanted to be the ones to do that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, tell us about that actor too. What was his experience jumping into the film, and kind of, he seems like he was game for anything.
Yeah, Sam is a really awesome comedian who does a show in underwear that Jenny introduced me to when I first moved to New York, and we've just been really big fans. So he kind of fit, like, the character's name, Sam, we kind of were thinking of him the whole time.
And where did you guys find what's this location, this kind of perfect motel vibe?
Yeah, it's upstate. It's in Catskill, New York. It's, I think, called the Red Ranch, right, Mary?
Red Ranch Inn in Catskill.
Yeah, we were looking for like wood paneling, horrible carpeting, just that kind of vibe. And this had been, other shorts have shot at this location. Seems like a popular spot for this.
We did a big day trip out to the Catskills, and I think we saw like 6 locations. There were many that were way scarier than this. And it was fun. But also we wanted to stay there because we were going to have the whole crew stay out there. It was like a little a little too creepy for your general vacation stay, but it really does feel like a time warp in there. They haven't really done a lot to modernize it, so it worked really well.
Do you think the purveyors of the Red Ranch Inn know that this is what their location is being often used for?
When we were looking at it, they kept thinking we were planning a big party. Like, we were talking about where our dance number was going to take place, and they're like, oh, the dancing could happen at this part of our hotel for your party. And we were like, right.
Not a party. Yeah, we had like a 22-year-old guy pretty much there the whole time, and I don't think he understood what was going on at all. It was awesome.
But they were so down, so would recommend if
Yeah.
you're looking for this kind of vibe. There.
I think, yeah, it was also a delight to see this film come through, and just has, you know, a really cool, interesting, like scratching your head a little bit approach to what you were just talking about, is seeing these kinds of women characters and sort of subverting the gaze a little bit onto him. So yeah, I think job well done. I think you also, the hotel or motel is perfect. And it did you guys have to do anything to change it for your production design, or was this it?
We did. Our production designer was awesome. So we had a really small budget for the transformation, but it does have a time travel element to it. She took kind of my color palette and then figured out what key pieces she could apply it to. So like, for example, these chairs were recovered specifically for this section of the film, and these curtains are made specially for this section of the film. And then we reset the room to be the actual rooms we were staying in, which aren't that modern, but it's a slightly different feel. So it was really minimal, thoughtful pieces to make it have a vibe.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, I think one of the things we always champion is creativity over, you know, deep pockets. So I think that's, you know, making choices like that and finding locations like that is adds so much to the film. And yeah, thank you guys. And I'm sorry Leah couldn't make it, but give her our best. If everybody else wants to come back on. Hopefully I didn't lose you. Yeah, just one thing we've been asking filmmakers, and again, we won't take too much more of your time, but is kind of talk about something that they're really excited about, something that they're watching, reading, listening to, consuming, and it just kind of get your current recommendation. Doesn't have to be highbrow, doesn't have to be, you know, Criterion Collection or whatever. It can be whatever is the last thing on your, you know, on your Apple TV or whatever. And I always do this where I don't actually think about my answer ahead of time either. But I will say that yeah, I just watched like one night ago, 2 nights ago, I watched Becoming, the Michelle Obama documentary, which has been out for a while, but I just been meaning to watch it. And then I did a little bit of research on the filmmaker herself, and was really interested to hear about her story, and essentially how it was kind of like, at least for the main part of the main production of filming, was essentially just like a one-woman band going and following around Michelle Obama, and she'd never done a feature before, and she'd done a lot of other shorts that got a lot of prestige, but I was just kind of thought that was a cool, extra encouraging story. The movie already is super inspiring and will have you crying for sure, but also just to hear the filmmaking story as well was really interesting, so I highly recommend that. And I will ask Julia, what have you been listening to, reading, watching, consuming?
Sure. Well, the last thing that I watched was Crime and Punishment on Hulu, which is a documentary about NYPD police officers who spoke out against corruption in the police department and quotas, and who still basically have not, you know, unsurprisingly, have not been able to achieve change through their Actions, which is I recommend, especially for anyone else who lives in New York, to understand specifically the NYPD and how people have been trying to reform them and how unsuccessful that has been. And also just the history, interestingly, about New York sort of was the start of using CompStat, which is like a way of attaching numbers and why quotas come for police departments, essentially, of like that they would need to make a certain number of arrests, and that's how they get funding. And anyway, so very interesting documentary on that topic. And then I've also just been making my way, a show that I've like has been on my list forever and that I've never watched until like the past month is Better Things on FX, which is just like a delightful show, and I think is very interesting as a writer because it's not really structured a lot of the time, but it's really interesting to watch, and it's just such good writing and character development that it's always very compelling. So I recommend that as well.
Yeah, I gotta get back on Better Things too. I kind of fell off. I feel like I watched the first season and then I just forgot about it. But great recommendations. What about you, Kevin?
Last night I watched I'm Not Your Negro, the James Baldwin doc from 2016, which I think was nominated for an Oscar. Obviously also very relevant to these times. I would recommend watching all the South by Southwest shorts that are still on MailChimp. If people haven't done it, there's a lot of great stuff on there. And something I read recently that I love was Trick Mirror by Gia Tolentino. She writes for The New Yorker, and it's like just 10 amazing essays. I think it came out late last year, early this year, but great book. It's actually, you can see, it's that yellow one right there.
Awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. What about you, Jenny?
Yeah, great question. I was trying to think of something. I feel like my brain has been so consumed. I watched, Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always is on Amazon for rental. It played at Sundance, and it's just an incredible film and story about a young woman traveling from Pennsylvania to New York City to get an abortion. And it was, I like haven't stopped thinking about it. It's one of those movies. And I'm really glad that even though, pandemic, it was able to get out there and we're able to see it streaming. I don't think I have anything beyond that.
That's a good one. Yeah, I want to watch that. And I was writing it down. Don't worry, I wasn't just zoning out over here. What about you, Mary?
I guess I have started a movie club via text with a couple of friends, and we're watching a different Korean movie every Saturday, which has been really fun. But we have been watching a lot of Bong Joon-ho's earlier work. That's all on Hulu now, or most of it is. And I think it's his first movie, Barking Dogs Never Bite, is so fun and hilarious. And I feel like it's really cool to see like what was the low budget first attempt of making something that has the humor of Parasite and the like intricate storytelling. So that's been really cool.
Nice.
I recommend.
Great. Yeah, I feel like I haven't seen some of his older stuff. I definitely want to check that out. What about you, Mr. McGee?
I have been listening obsessively to a podcast called Lexicon Valley, which is a podcast about language, and they tackle a lot of like the etymology of certain words or the origin of certain phrases. And I think it's not just interesting, but it's really great as I think, writer or lyricist, poet, whatever you create. It's just a good way to get your wheels turning and kind of get a different and unique perspective on a lot of phrases and words.
Cool. That sounds really interesting. What about you, Nadia?
So I during the quarantine, I did do the Better Things thing as well, because I did watch the first season before, and then I realized I was gonna just rewatch everything because it made me feel so good, like during this time, that it just made me feel better. But I also had I just watched a lot of just not so high quality stuff, but a lot of like Scandinavian crime series and Ozark, which I loved. And I also, during the time when I was making my film, I had this thing when every day I would obsessively listen to news from the US, because I used to live in the US, and I lived in New York and all this stuff. So I know much more about US politics than Hungarian politics. Actually, I was afraid to watch Hungarian politics. So that kind of stuff. So I watch a lot of like political shows as well, like even on his series, like The Good Fight and things like that. And I also try to read more, and I'm trying to get into reading some like longer books like Elena Ferrante's series and a Norwegian writer's Nysgard's like series of books. So it's just too much anyway, and I don't have so much time besides working, but I'm trying to do that as well.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thank you guys again so much for doing this, and especially know it's really late at night over there. I want to get you to bed. But you know, thanks for being a part of this little community, because I think this is, if it was the normal festival, this is the time where we'd all head to the bar and get the free booze that we so depend on at the Lower East Side Film Festival. So sorry we can't offer that, but I'm glad that we were able to connect and have a little bit of that community back. So I really appreciate you guys joining and also creating your work and continuing to think of us when you're submitting it. And yeah, like I said, this is the Not Suitable for Work from Home shorts, and this Q&A, as well as all the shorts, will be available from June 18th to the 29th on our virtual platform. Yeah, thank you guys so much for being a part of this, and hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and can't wait to see more work from you guys in the future.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.